It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea's main opposition party has won major victories in key by-elections held Wednesday, taking the mayorships of the country's two biggest cities, Seoul and Busan. In Seoul, Oh Se-hoon of the People Power Party won 57.5% of the vote, handily beating the candidate of the ruling Democratic Party, Park Young-sun, who got 39.2%. In Busan, the PPP's candidate, Park Hyung-jun, beat his opponent, Kim Young-chun of the DP, in an even bigger landslide at 62.7% to 34.4%. Turnout was at a record high for a by-election. The new mayors are finishing terms started by their predecessors and will serve until June next year. And the leadership of the ruling Democratic Party have stepped down to take responsibility for Wednesday's crushing election defeat. The party's acting chief and floor leader, Kim Tae-yeon, said the party humbly accepts the sentiment of the public and pledged that it will work to innovate. The party will be led by an emergency committee until new leaders are picked. A new floor leader will be elected next Friday and a new chairman at a party convention early next month.
In this election have given the Democratic Party a lot of tasks to do. We will reflect deeply and make efforts to innovate. We will also rectify issues of fairness and justice within the party until the people are satisfied.
As for President Moon Jae-in, he called the defeat a reprimand from the people, and he vowed to govern with greater responsibility. Moon said that he will concentrate his administration's efforts on fulfilling what he called the desperate demands of the people, such as overcoming COVID-19, revitalizing the economy, and rooting out corruption in real estate. Some speculate that the administration could review some of its key policies, as well as reshuffle the cabinet in a bid to get some fresh momentum. Seoul's new mayor, Oh Se-hoon, is a familiar face, having served in the post most recently a decade ago. He returned to City Hall today to start his administration, but he'll need the cooperation of the ruling party to get some things done. Jang Tae-hyun reports.
The new mayor of Seoul, Oh Se-hoon, starts his first day on the job. He won Wednesday's by-election as the candidate for the main opposition People Power Party. Oh has already served as the mayor of Seoul, running the city between 2006 and 2011 before leaving midway through his second term after clashing with the opposition-dominated city council over their introduction of free school lunches for all students. When entering the city hall on Thursday, Oh expressed his pledge as the new mayor.
Starting from today, Seoul City will work hard again. I'll really try hard to help Seoul residents who are struggling from COVID-19 and from other economic hardships. I'd really like to help in some way.
Since the new mayor is from the opposition party, he'll have to cooperate with the ruling party in order to get things done. Mayor Oh said that he'll break down housing regulations through a speed housing supply project. He's planning to ease height regulations for his whole apartments and expand commercial zones outside the richest districts of Gangnam, Seocho, and Songpa. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi at a meeting on Thursday said there will be no changes in the government's real estate policy, and he expects that there will be stronger cooperation between the central government and local governments. Now that there are plans to change the policies, it remains to be seen if the new mayor can carry them out in 15 months. Jang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
And now the latest on the coronavirus situation in Korea. Exactly 700 new cases reported today, the highest daily total in over 3 months. Officials are not ready to say that a fourth wave of the virus has begun, but they do say it might be coming soon, so new measures are in the works. Kim Hyun-sung reports.
South Korea was hit with another substantial spike in new COVID-19 infections Thursday, with 700 confirmed within a single 24-hour period. The daily tally marks the highest count of confirmed cases in South Korea in 91 days, or since early January. Officials are now admitting a fourth wave, something that's been forecast for weeks, might be around the corner.
We have an urgent crisis where a fourth wave might become a reality if we fail to curb the spread. If you look at the root of infections, the situation has become much more serious.
674 of Thursday's cases were local transmissions. The Greater Seoul area reported 485 local infections, accounting for 72% of the day's domestic cases. The southern city of Busan recorded 51 new local infections. Daejeon, a city in the center of the country, confirmed 25.
Cluster infections are popping up everywhere, whether it's the capital or elsewhere. The virus is spreading wherever there's a crack in prevention, not only at entertainment and leisure facilities, but also at schools, churches, restaurants, and gyms.
A cluster from an entertainment facility in Busan has now seen at least 318 linked infections. A traveling church group has become the source of 208 cases, with 7 more confirmed on Thursday afternoon. In response, the South Korean government on Friday will announce new measures in a bid to stem the spread. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the global markets this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-hoon, Professor of Economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, good afternoon. Thank you for coming on.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, the countries of the G20, which includes Korea, have signed to work towards a global standard when it comes to corporate taxation. That would set a minimum rate for companies. Certain countries have set exceptionally low rates, some say unfairly, to attract investment. So this is one of the main reasons they're doing this. Tell us about this move by the G20, Professor.
In 2017, President Trump cut maximum corporate tax rate from 35% to 21% to induce U.S. corporations' domestic investment. And recently, to President Biden, it became very important to find another tax revenue to finance his stimulus package of $3 trillion. So President Biden has decided to recover maximum corporate tax rate up to 28% from previous 21%. But here comes another concern of U.S. government that higher corporation tax derives U.S. corporation out to foreign countries where tax rate is lower. So U.S. government hopes to agree on a minimum corporation tax rate, at least 21% level with 20 leading economies. Since all major economies are experiencing the same problem, negotiations on global minimum tax rate can succeed.
It would be an extraordinary thing if it did succeed. We'll have to keep an eye on that. And now, according to the latest minutes from the Fed meeting, Professor, officials think the U.S. is looking at its strongest growth in 40 years, thanks in part to the Biden stimulus package, which they admit was bigger than they expected. And despite this positive outlook, Fed officials are still backing the dovish position of Chairman Powell. What do you make of these minutes from the Fed?
In the last FOMC meeting, U.S. Fed raised this year's U.S. economic growth forecast from previous 4.2% to 6.5%. And other international organizations like IMF and OECD agree on 6% level U.S. economic growth for this year. According to recently released minutes of last FOMC meeting, Fed officials have concluded that there is no urgency to pair monetary policy support, even with intensifying inflation pressure. All these together indicate zero key interest rate policy of the U.S. Fed will be continued at least until the end of this year.
And now stocks in New York were mixed overnight on those issues and the Biden administration's spending plans. The S&P and the Dow up slightly. Tech shares on the NASDAQ a little lower. What's the story in the global markets?
Yesterday's U.S. market is pretty much affected by minutes of last FOMC meeting. There were both signs of raising interest rate and continuing zero interest rate. As a result, U.S. market is mixed between Dow Jones and NASDAQ. Dow Jones and S&P 500 had 0.1% return, but NASDAQ dropped by 0.1% yesterday. Other major markets were also mixed over Asian markets and European markets. Shanghai, Hong Kong, and London had a positive return yesterday, but Tokyo, Paris, and Frankfurt had negative returns.
And Korean stocks have seen gains lately too. That continued today, though the Kospi was up and down. It closed above 31.41. The Kosdaq with a bigger gain. Tell us about the local markets.
In domestic market today, Kospi had a 0.2% return and Kosdaq had 0.9% return. Domestic markets rise is led by individual investors and foreign investors. Particularly until today, there was 6 straight days foreign investors net purchase in Kospi market. It is a positive sign to Korean market's profitability in the future.
And now, speaking of profitability, let's look at Samsung. Its chip plant in Austin, Texas, of course, was hit by the massive power outages last month from the winter storm. Operations are now getting back to normal, though. The company in the first quarter is estimating a surge in profits and revenues, and the chip sector is expected to improve in the second quarter. Tell us about the situation with Samsung and what you see ahead for the sector in Q2.
Samsung Electronics, the world's largest smartphone and memory chip maker, forecast operating profit of 9.3 trillion won, or $8.3 billion for the first quarter. Samsung Electronics said it expects a 44% increase in operating profit for the first quarter of this year, topping expectations during a global shortage of semiconductors and despite shutdowns of some U.S. chip production facilities. Actually, U.S. Biden administration is expected to meet later this month with chip makers with Samsung Electronics a likely participant to boost their chip production during global shortage. About $50 billion will go toward the American semiconductor industry as a part of President Biden's $2.3 trillion infrastructure plan. This is a very powerful and positive factor for Samsung Electronics business for the near future.
Yeah, of course, it was big news a few weeks ago when Intel said it was going back into the chip manufacturing business, so that'll be interesting to watch. Professor, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much.
Now, one of the most talked about issues among global businesses this year has been ESG, which stands for Environment, Social Responsibility, and Governance. It's becoming a matter of survival for companies to focus on these non-financial aspects of their business amid growing calls to do so from investors and as well as governments. These issues today concern the coup in Myanmar, for example, climate change, and much more. Kim Sung-min reports.
As Myanmar's army continues its bloody crackdown on protesters, multinational firms operating in the country in partnership with the military have faced sharp criticism.
We want to call on Total to ask it to act in the face of the situation in Myanmar. We're asking it to listen to the voices of the Myanmar people, of the international community, and also of the elected parliament, which is asking it to stop all support to the junta, notably by blocking its financing of the junta.
While the French energy group is yet to cut ties with Myanmar, many firms including Australia's Woodside Petroleum and Japan's Kirin Holdings have already pulled the plug, and South Korea's POSCO is already reportedly looking at ways to exit a joint venture with a military-controlled firm. This is just one example of how today's interest groups assess firms, taking broader aspects into consideration other than product quality itself, perhaps why growing numbers of firms are shifting towards ESG criteria, valuing environment, social responsibility, and good corporate governance in their operations.
Consumers differentiate between good companies and bad companies and are willing to pay more for environmentally ethical products. Young job seekers also consider if they could take pride in the company rather than just looking at the salary.
It is not just customers. Just last year, global investment giant BlackRock decided not to invest in companies generating more than 25% of their revenue from thermal coal.
After all, the bottom line of ESG is sustainable development, so each category is to promote sustainable development.
Governments across the world are also stepping up to meet this trend. To tackle environmental issues, the US, China, and South Korea have announced their plans to go carbon neutral within a few decades. The EU is in the process of formalizing a carbon tax on imported goods by 2023. And the German government has adopted a draft law to ensure corporate compliance with human rights and environmental protection throughout supply chains. These regulations could hit Korean companies operating overseas or looking to enter the global market.
If companies have good carbon-neutral strategies, it will become a good opportunity to enter a market, but those who are not ready could lose their export opportunities.
Experts say that growing consumer consciousness along with stronger regulations will make companies adopt ESG as a strategy for survival. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.